And now, it's time to sit back and enjoy the Two True Freaks Internet Radio Broadcast.
Disenfranchised by the modern comics industry, producer Paul Spataro, Dr. Bill Robinson, and Scott H. Gardner now
ply the time stream in a never-ending quest to rediscover and reconnect with that unique brand of fun and excitement that can only truly be found in good old-fashioned, randomly selected comic book back issues. Journey with them now. Back to the bins.
Hello everybody, welcome to a special Back to the Bins. It's me, it's Dr. Bill Robinson, and once again we welcome our friends from Comic Geek Speak, Chris Eberly and Adam Murd, but we add to the list now our friend Ian Levinstein, who is also now a CGS regular.
Hello. Thanks for having us on as always, Paul. It's a treat.
It's a treat for us to have you guys. We appreciate you making the time for us.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Just sorry we weren't able to make it a month or two earlier than this as originally planned.
Well, it's, life gets in the way, and I totally get that. And, you have your own show to do, so when you make time for us, I appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
So, and as I said, and we talked about just for a moment beforehand, but, Ian, you and I met, you were doing just comic timing. Now, is that still in existence?
Yeah, it's still in existence. I try to crank out an episode at least once every 2 months or so. And our latest one was on the Joker movie that came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, I have not seen that one come up on my phone.
Yep, episode 199. So we're one away from 200, and I'm planning on possibly reporting in person with Brent since I'm going to be in Orlando for Thanksgiving. So it may work out that way, but. Crossing my fingers on that.
Cool. And then, how often do you guys get together to record for CGS? Or how often do you try to? Is probably a better way to say it.
Well, we try to do it once a week, but that's not always possible because of either technical issues or our schedules. But ideally, once a week.
Yeah,
we've been lucky enough to have a wealth of episodes in the can in recent weeks, so we haven't had to do it every week, but it'll be catching up to us soon.
Yeah, we just wrapped up our, we call it Assistant Editors Month, where we have other people do episodes just to give us a break for a while.
Love that.
In CGS land, we call that the Cabal.
So you even have a better name for it than us.
Oh, come on, Paul. That's a great Marvel throwback. I love that.
Yeah, I even used, the first time we did it, on the picture that went with each episode, I used this stamp from the Marvel Comics. That they had on the cover of each issue.
Yep. Don't say we didn't warn you.
You'd be giving us a further break and further stuff to release on the feed by simulcasting this on both. So life is easier that way.
Well, anything we could do to make life easier is a plus. It's it's funny that this is all for fun. We're not making any money doing it, but there is a sense of pressure to get it all done right and to get it, to keep the schedule going and everything. It's all self-imposed, but there's still that pressure there.
That was the entire reason I went to Pennsylvania to meet these fine gentlemen a week prior, was to get the Skype computer up and running, and that's how Murd's talking to you today. So it's all about getting things up and running nice and smoothly.
Cool. All right, so I guess we might as well hop right into it. And you three boys have brought books with you, so I'm going to say dealer's choice. Who wants to go first?
I think Ian should go first.
Ready? So mine is the one DC book of the bunch here, and the story behind this one is pretty simple. It came out back in 2001, and I remember picking it up off the stands at my local comic shop near my college, Brooklyn College. Bulletproof Comics and Cards, still in existence, right there by the college. So.
And I'm just going to interrupt you. When I went to Brooklyn College for 1 year, that existed, and that was quite a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, Hanks had the store up and running for many a year now. He was recently set up a New York Comic Con. So if you were over in the comic buying area of the con, you might into it or not. So.
But Paul, when you went, was it called Stone Proof because they didn't have bullets then?
Oh, you are so funny.
That's my job. Well, I try to make that my job.
That was honestly, I didn't really care for Brooklyn College very much. That's why I only went there 1 year. But that was like the one pleasure of going there was going over to the comic store every once in a while.
Yeah. So it's a damn fine shop, and it's still up and running in the exact spot. And they've opened up a comic art gallery as well on the second floor. So very, very, very cool to see Hank still kicking there.
That is cool.
Yep. This one. No, go ahead.
I was going to say there used to be a store on Flatbush Avenue by Ditmas Avenue called My Friend's Bookstore. And somehow I got into a conversation with Dan DiDio and Jimmy Palmiotti, and it turned out that all three of us used that store.
If that store was still in existence when I lived like 3 blocks away from that, I would have been there every day.
That was also like the first store when VHS tapes first came into vogue, where they were doing rentals out of that store.
Oh my God! Yeah, that might have been like I'm trying to think of like where that was like position wise. Like I know exactly where that is because I lived between 21st and I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm boring your listeners by even saying this, but 21st between Ditmas and Newkirk was my old stomping ground. So I used to be right around Ditmas all the frickin' time. So that's funny that there used to be a comic shop there because. I wish there was.
Yeah, well, wherever you are, you wish there's a comic store. And while it may bore the listeners to find out that, it's still cool for me to hear, stuff about the areas where I used to haunt as well.
Hell yeah. And this comic came out right around that time where I was getting into college. And shortly before this, I read Crisis on Infinite Earths for the first time. Somewhere when it happened, I'm sure Murd sneezed, even though he didn't know me yet. Just even mentioning Crisis probably just made it, because I think that happens every time anybody mentions Crisis.
Another shadow demon gets his wings.
I love it. And like right around then, I was first, really getting into like, older DC comics. And I saw this Deadman issue with the headline "A Crisis in Hand," and it immediately drew me to it. And I had never read Deadman before. I knew of the character just from showing up in other books, but I'd never read specifically a Deadman title. And I figured that this would be appropriate as Halloween just passed for us to touch on this on today's episode. And the writer for this story was Steve Vance, a name I'm not familiar with at all. Don't know if he's done anything else of note in the comic book world, but Leonard Kirk is the penciler, and I'm a huge fan of his work. So happy to see him do anything here, and covered by Jimmy Palmiotti as well. So all names that are familiar to everybody. And the story itself is we're sort of just taken straight into the world of Deadman, and it's immediately apparent to us that this is happening during Crisis on Infinite Earths. Which is interesting because, I rarely saw titles basing themselves, before the merging of the Earths, unless it was, explicitly put that way, like a pre-crisis tale or something like that. And this one just goes ahead and throws you right in, here you are in a pre-crisis world, right as Crisis on Infinite Earths is happening. So that was pretty cool. Deadman winds up in his trippy, psychedelic reality and meets Ramakrishna there, or at least he thinks it's Ramakrishna, and he tells him that he has a very important mission coming up, and that he should prep himself for it. And while helping out a bunch of civilians who were, dealing with the crisis, he comes across the dying body of Barry Allen as he's being sent from time period to time period. As he's about to face off against the Anti-Monitor in the in the antimatter universe.
Is it Quard?
Quard. Yes.
Quard. Yes.
That's what I was looking for. And yeah, he winds up in the antimatter universe as well on Cord, and gets to experience the Anti-Monitor in all of its glory. Nice iteration of the Anti-Monitor that Leonard Kirk presents here. Very old school, very old fashioned, right on model. Absolutely what I would expect from it. So that made me pretty happy. And Deadman tries to possess the Anti-Monitor, and shockingly, it doesn't go so well. But he is able to possess Psycho Pirate at one point to help out the Flash as he's trying to take down the Anti-Monitor, and helps out a little bit with taking out the winged. What were the troopers called again? I always forget when it comes to
weapons masters.
Well, the weaponers. The foot soldiers with the winged helmets are the Thunderers, which are like the agents of the weaponers.
Got it.
And which of the Anti-Monitor has taken as his private personal guard strike force.
Excellent. We can count on you for that. And as he's dealing with the Thunderers, Deadman gets a shot in the head, literally, and suddenly starts reliving his timeline a little bit. So anybody who's unfamiliar with Deadman, like I was at the time, and his backstory, we get a solid 3 pages worth of backstory for Deadman, and then get to actually see him experience the death of the Flash in Crisis. He tries to save him, but he's a minute too late, and there's Barry Allen disintegrating in front of his eyes. However, he then winds up meeting the spirit of Barry Allen almost immediately after Barry dies, and Deadman takes this as his idea that, well, clearly I'm here to help him into the realm of the dead. So he goes ahead and shows him into the light, and as he's leading Barry there, he gets hit by a shock as Darius Caldera, what a name, winds up coming out of the light and winds up starting to fight them, and he knows Darius from his previous life, Deadman, and or at least when he was in Nanda Parbat, after he had died, but for a while he was living there before Nanda Parbat got destroyed, and that's where he recognizes Darius from. Darius gets into a giant fight with Deadman and Barry Allen, and Barry's not used to being a spirit, so he doesn't have full capabilities at this point, and Darius kidnapped Barry Allen, his spirit, and held him captive, and winds up taking hold of him, and then summoning all of his strength, and he looks like he's going to take down Deadman, and then we get continued next week on the very next page, and that's when I realized, oh hey, this is going to be a weekly series. How about that? And that's where we left off at the end of this first issue, with Darius getting the upper hand, and the preview for the next issue had told me that this was going to just be going through the many deaths that have happened in the DC universe, as issue 2 focuses upon the death of Jason Todd. That's another soul for him to capture.
So, I mean, I was a little confused with how he's jumping through time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wasn't sure exactly what the mechanism of that was.
The mechanism of Barry Allen jumping through time? Or,
no, Deadman jumping through time.
Deadman, yeah. I believe in this story, it's his connection to Ramakrishna that allows him to jump through time. I haven't read the rest of this in a while, so it escapes me on exactly how that happened. But I know that at least the Deadman that we're dealing with throughout this is mainly the one from Crisis, and then he just winds up jumping ahead to another point after that. I'm trying to read ahead here in issue 2 to see if they actually explain it right away.
Couldn't the spirit realm be attached to any time, technically?
That's a good point. That's a possibility. I'm just going to go with that.
I'm gonna just keep playing devil's advocate and say, but when he first connects with Barry Allen here, Barry Allen isn't in the spirit realm yet.
Looking at issue 2, it was Ramakrishna or someone else who basically summons a warp, which then gets him further along in time to then the death of Jason Todd. So he's definitely using these like warps in time in order to get to where he's going.
Okay, so I mean it's somebody specifically manipulating time as opposed to some unnamed phenomena.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, I'm just speculating that at the end of the series it's probably all clear, but because this is issue 1, maybe they're just kind of leaving that out there for you to learn as you go along.
Exactly, yeah, because we haven't really gotten to the time travel portion yet, outside of Barry Allen, doing his whole crisis thing. So that's more apparent by the time issue 2 rolls around and we're dealing with Jason Todd, and then I think issue 3 may have dealt with the death of Superman, if I remember correctly.
I think you do.
Yep, and then forget what the 4th death was, but
I'm thinking Hal Jordan.
More than likely, that sounds about right. So.
Just as an aside, I quickly looked up Steve Vance, and he's got some credits, not a lot, as a penciler and an inker.
Mm-hmm.
American Splendor, Big Book of Bad, Big Book of the 70s, Big Book of Vice. Those are the penciler ones. As a writer, he's listed on Bad Girls, Dead Man, Elseworlds Superman, DC Comics presents Wonder Woman Adventures #1, Shazam: The Greatest Stories Ever Told, some more Dead Man issues. Not a lot. He doesn't have a very big resume, but he does have, as I said, credits as a penciler, as an inker, and as a writer.
Got it.
As I recall, he wrote a bunch of issues of the Adventures in the DC Universe series, which is like the Timverse take on, animated style take on a variety of different DC characters other than Batman and Superman.
Oh, right. Nice. And Murd was correct. Issue 4 dealt with Hal Jordan's death, and then issue 5 was Hal Jordan as a Spectre. So that concluded things there. So overall, I really enjoyed this series when it was coming out back in the day, and I feel like this first issue really did hold up to me. I'm glad that I picked it, and it makes me kind of just want to reread the whole damn thing, because I'm a huge fan of time travel and these important deaths. Although many of them have since been reversed. In fact, all of them have been reversed. Now that I think about it, literally every death in this has been reversed since 2001 happened.
Yep.
And isn't there something at the end of this one where they talk about how they're not going to reverse the Barry Allen death?
Yep. And I guess they changed their mind. Yeah, but it's still some good solid comics reading fun, and I enjoy a good miniseries.
Yep, I picked this one up off the Rex too, Ian. Although, part for the course for me, I didn't get around to reading it until about 10 or so years later. But I'm going to keep my remarks here to a minimum, because I rattled on at great length about this first issue in Murd's Time Bubble, the 26th time. But I agree with you that it's a solid read, and it does hold up pretty well. The crisis angle, can't help but appeal to me also. Before the miniseries is over, there's also a connection to Underworld Unleashed, another one of my favorite DC events. I think the main reason this miniseries existed was to drive sales on an upcoming Dead Man ongoing, which lasted like 9 issues and was also written by Steve Vance. I think it's one of the things that Paul mentioned a minute ago. Mm-hmm. Vance's other credits as a writer. And it does draw pretty heavily on a 1980s Dead Man miniseries that was written by Andy Helfer, who also just happens to be the editor on this miniseries. So there's a couple of ulterior motives involved, but it's fine. We'll put up with that as long as we get these interesting little time travel nuggets and interactions with major flashpoints, no pun intended, in DC history.
Ian, did you say it was a Palmiotti cover?
According to DC's app, it was covers by Jimmy Palmiotti, Kevin Nolan, Dave Stewart, Todd Klein, and Jose L. Garcia Lopez. So I think there might have been a bunch of variants for this one.
Okay, because the one I'm looking at least, it's got a kind of a close-up of Dead Man holding a small skeletonized Flash in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Garcia Lopez.
And that's Garcia Lopez. That's why I was a little confused. They had said Palmiotti.
Yeah.
I love the cover. This cover, at least, I love. I don't have access to the other one. The interior art is pretty sharp as well. The Leonard Kirk interior art. And I think the story's pretty cool. I mean, all around, I think this is a good issue. It had me pretty much pulled in, and it's got me curious to read the remaining 5-issue series, so the remaining 4, and that hook of it being the different deaths is actually one that I find compelling. It doesn't feel like just a big gimmick. It feels like something that's actually interesting to me. So I'm pretty cool on this one. It's one of the thoughts I had was early on. There's the scene when he meets up with the Phantom Stranger and the Spectre, and I was thinking, those are characters that I think people find intriguing but are somewhat confused by, because I think they're almost intentionally confusing, personally, and I think they're almost trying to distance Deadman from them in that scene where they talk about, well, we're magic, and he's like, well, I'm not really magic, that kind of thing. So it almost feels like they're trying to say, if you're confused by them, don't worry about that. You could still read this.
Yeah, and they may have also been trying to throw in characters that weren't really seen that much in Crisis otherwise, which that's that whenever you're doing side stories like that, or at least like extra scenes in series, it's good not to deal with characters that had a lot to do with that particular series.
Yeah, I think most of my Deadman exposure has been in Brave and the Bold, so that's kind of a little bit more of a lighthearted take on him for the most part. So I enjoyed this as almost like a different focus from what I'm used to as well.
Yeah.
Ian, what I loved about your selection, because I never read this book. I read it 20 minutes ago, so it's very fresh for me. Is that you picked a topic that I'm becoming well versed in thanks to Murd and Peter and all the episodes they've done on the Crisis tapes. So it was really exciting to see the Psychopirate, to understand exactly what was going on with the Flash, and as we were saying, to get a different perspective on that, such a significant event in the history of the DC universe through the eyes of Deadman, who's sort of trying to figure out what's exactly going on around him. It was really a thrill to experience the story from that perspective. This is a great pick. I think the art is fantastic. It has almost a bit of a Silver Age feel to it a little bit. I just think the art is beautifully done. I love stories that give you just to kind of fill in some gaps on a massive event and bring it down to the level of one character who maybe wasn't directly involved in it but is experiencing it from sort of their point of view. This was a lot of fun. Great pick by you, sir.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said it shows it the one character, but it's also not, where you're inundated with 80 crossovers, and there, each one of those gives you one character, and it's just like too much overload at once. Here we're getting it, 15 years after the Crisis, a look back on it through a different eye, and I think that's kind of cool.
I also love the pages where they kind of they give you sort of a crash course on Deadman's history, which I thought were beautifully rendered. This is, again, I realize this is part of a larger miniseries, but I just I enjoyed reading it as just sort of almost a one and done in a sense, even though it's really not. And you don't see much of this anymore in comics, and I thought it was really well executed.
Yeah, and completely agree with you on that. Especially with the with that quick origin of his. Like I said, I was familiar with the character and what he did, but I didn't really know much about his actual backstory before reading this back in 2001, and now here we go. So.
Anybody have any other comments on this one?
Murd, I had a quick question for you. It's related, but tangentially.
Go ahead, Bill.
This is Crisis, and it made me think about. I know I've listened to many of. I'm not caught up. I'm behind on my listenings of the Crisis tapes, but I will catch up eventually. Have you had any interest in any of the Crisis buildup that's going on in the current CW shows, or do you watch them?
The only one that I'm still watching at this point is The Flash, which is just as well, because I think that's the one that's going to be most closely tied into the upcoming Crisis event anyway. So I'll certainly watch all the tie-in episodes of all the different remaining Arrowverse shows.
Well, because Arrow has been pretty tightened in. It went in because Ollie is being used as a pawn or tool. They're not quite sure yet of the Monitor. I don't know if you might want to go back and watch the. It's tough to watch them. I watch them after the fact, streaming. And I fast forward through the future stuff. There's two timelines in the show. I fast forward through the future stuff and I watch the current stuff. And basically, Ollie's being bounced around through different universes by the Monitor to gain him certain items, and he's not quite sure why. Like in the latest one, he went to Nanda Parbat to gain a scroll and to find out some information about the Monitor specifically.
I'm very curious because I've pretty much given up on all the CW shows because it kind of started to feel like they were all very, very repetitive.
Don't try to catch up. Just start watching this season. It's still online.
What I'm curious about is how are they depicting the Monitor?
He looks almost exactly the same.
Yeah, he's very well cast, and his costume is very well designed.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
It's one of the things I have to say that I have enjoyed about a lot of these shows, even though I've stopped watching them, is that they don't seem to shy away from their roots. You know, it doesn't have that, it has to be grounded in the real world. Nobody would wear a costume like this. You know, I think it was the first time that we saw the killer shark on The Flash that I thought, okay, they've totally embraced this.
They did not jump the shark.
Yeah, no, not at all.
You know, it's so nice to be on a show with somebody who makes cornier jokes than I do.
It's hard to find those.
I know.
No, this is a great book. This is the first time that I've read this. I've taken an interest in DC that I didn't have, that I haven't had for quite a while. And one of the things has been with the JSA and the Justice Society and also Batman and the Outsiders. And there's been a few smaller DC miniseries that I picked up. So I may have to look for this now too when I'm digging and snorting, looking around for some DC books.
Well, for anybody who has the DC Universe app, that's how I went and reread my my back issue of this. They have the entire miniseries on there, and tons of other Deadman material as well. So if you're familiar with the character or you're not, and you happen to be signed up to watch Titans or what have you, just go ahead and check out their comic book backlog, and you'll be able to find it all there.
Cool.
All right, Ian, do you recall the rating system?
Refresh my memory, sir.
We rated cover, interior art, story, and overall, and we give them grades A through F, just like a school grade.
Okay. Well, the cover, I'd definitely give it a solid A.
Now, are you working with the Palmiotti cover or the Garcia Lopez?
Garcia Lopez, yeah, that's the one that's on my app as well.
Okay.
So I'll just go ahead and give that a solid A there. Writing and art, I give A's as well, and story, it's gonna straight up be an A. Yeah, no, this issue is an overall A for me. I'm very satisfied with what it had to offer, and it holds up on reread, and that's important for a package.
Yeah, I'm gonna pretty much agree with you. I think the cover is an A. It's beautiful. The interior art is it's very easy to follow what's going on, which is no small task because this story is kind of going all over the place. Mm-hmm. And it's just everybody's drawn really, really well in it. It almost feels like a beautiful companion piece to the George Perez art of Crisis. So I'm with you on the A there. And story-wise, I think for first issue, it gives you a lot of exposition to bring you up to date on what's going on, but it never feels like they're hitting you over the head with it. So I'm going with an A there, and I'm going to give the book an F overall. Oh no, I guess I'll give it an A.
Oh, yes. Yep. Which is it, right?
Yeah, I just figured I'd screw around there. Anybody else who wants to?
I'll go. I concur wholeheartedly, Paul. A all along, all down the spectrum. I mean, I've read very little Dead Man. I know the basics of the character, but I didn't know what to expect, and the fact that since Ian picked it, I figured I was probably going to like it because Ian has excellent taste. But that said, it actually exceeded my expectations. I found myself within a few pages really digging this book, where it wasn't just I was just reading out of a sense of duty. I was really enjoying it, and I think it's an excellent package in terms of its execution. Cover art is magnificent, and the story was captivating me. So an A all around.
I'm gonna just comment on your comment that it never felt like a chore, and that is the one thing that, because we read the books for the show. Every once in a while, one comes up that feels like a chore,
of course.
And that is so annoying. Because those are the ones I just want to put down and put away. But we're reading them for the show, so you got to finish them.
Yep.
Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's kind of irritating.
I'm reminded of when, for our introducing episodes of CGS, we read a mid-'90s Captain Marvel issue that was not the best.
Captain Captain Marvel, or because it would be Shazam if it was DC, so that was a silly question.
Gina Spell, Captain Marvel, pre Peter David.
Okay.
It was still Fabian Nicieza, but it wasn't the best Fabian Nicieza any of us had ever seen.
At least he wasn't Legacy at the time.
He kind of was in alt name.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll just pass on that one altogether.
That's perfectly fine.
Bill, Murd, any comments on the grading on this one?
Yeah, I think I could go along with A's all down the board. The Garcia Lopez cover is, as you've said, Paul, gorgeous. The Leonard Kirk artwork is also quite satisfying. I liked what he did on the Peter David Supergirl series, and I like what he's done here. I agree that he draws a pretty mean anti-monitor. The story, I certainly give an A to what happens in this first issue. I'm not sure I would give the same grade to the 5-issue arc as a whole, but it's off to a great start in this first issue, and so that averages out to an A overall.
Did you read the rest of the series?
Yes, I did. It's been like Ian, it's been some time since I've read the other 4 issues, but I have read them all.
And I will mention that Leonard Kirk is not the penciler on every issue.
Right. 1, 3, and 5, if I recall correctly.
Well, just looking at the page with the next issue blurb, it mentions Jim Aparo.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I was gonna say I wouldn't complain about that.
Exactly. And then issue 4 is somebody by the name of M.D. Bright. Not familiar with that guy at all, but
he's worked a lot with Christopher Priest. He's a fine artist.
Mm-hmm. He was the artist on Quantum and Woody, for example.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I know him now.
Bill?
So, Paul, you know how I've been harping on lately about House of X and Powers of X?
Yes, I do.
Which has not, I don't think any of those have actually aired yet. So my big beef with that was how they really just reused existing, reused just straight up artwork, existing panels, and just changed one at the end to give you a different perspective. I like this. This is the way things should be done. If you want to tell something, because this retells something that happened in Crisis, but from a different point of view and a different perspective. And to me, I don't feel cheated or that it was repetitive, which is my big gripe about House of X, Power of X. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know what you guys think of it, but
I am way more positive than you are, but I respectfully understand your opinion.
Why, thank you. I enjoyed it up until like the very last, the last book of the two. I think it was Powers of X, with basically rehashing panels all from the other books. But this is not what that is. This is something that happened. It's just told differently. I like it. I'll give it A all around, just so we can move along and I don't keep harping on that subject like I have been a lot.
All right. Who wants to go second?
I think I better had.
All right, so we'll go over to Machine Man, right?
Yes. That's which is somewhat sillier selection than what Chris has.
Oh, Murd, this selection is inspired. I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, yours is sublime, Chris. So I think we need to finish up the CGS portion of the program with that.
Thanks.
My selection is Machine Man, Volume 1. This is the 1978 volume, number 19. which is the final issue of that series. It started up in 1978, and now the copyright date on the cover of number 19 says 1979, but the indicia inside tells us it's the February 1981 issue, which means that it actually hit stand sometime in late 1980, so sometime around the beginning of the 80s. Let's just put it that way. And on the front cover, there's a little banner at the bottom, sort of a cheeky, snarky little thing that says, "Complete your collection special," or "Guess what mag won't have a 20th issue?" So that's this is during the Jim Shooter reign at Marvel, when he was the editor-in-chief, and he tended to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about the cancellation of certain series, and I think this is that that aspect of his sense of humor showing through in that little banner on the bottom. But what it's telling us is this is the final issue of Machine Man's first ongoing series after being moved out of the pages of 2001: A Space Odyssey in the late 70s. So by this point in the series run, i.e. the end point in the series run, it was being written by Tom DeFalco, with artwork by legendary founding father of the Marvel age, Steve Ditko, edited by Denny O'Neil, who was at Marvel at this time, as we'll also see when Chris talks about his pick, because it was also edited by Denny O'Neil. And it finds our hero, Machine Man, the Living Robot, which at one time had been the subtitle shown on the cover of every issue, but they dropped that a few issues before number 19. He is dealing with the fallout of a battle from an earlier story arc, in which he battled Madam Menace, and received a damaging blow to his synthetic human face, so that the left half of it is hideously melted and scarred, which is having a pretty serious psychological impact on him. Because, as we know, Machine Man's robotic alter ego, his human alter ego is Aaron Stack. His robotic alter ego is X-51, which means that he is the 51st in the X series of artificial humanoid prototypes. And X1 through X50 all went insane and had to be destroyed shortly after activation. The difference for X-51 was that his creator, Dr. Abel Stack, gave him this artificial human face, named him Aaron Stack, and treated him like the roboticist's own natural-born son. So that kind of helped him ease into his artificial human life and intelligence. But now that human facade has been damaged, he's suffering bouts of berserker rage. So that's kind of the subplot that he's dealing with at the beginning of this issue. So he goes to see, we get to see some members of his supporting cast in this issue, some of which will never be seen again. But he confers with his psychiatrist and human life coach, Dr. Peter Spaulding, and also his mechanic, Gears Garvin, a tough-talking technological product who looks and sounds as if he might have been based, at least in part, on Tom DeFalco himself. Yeah, he's. I think at some point in the future, Gears Garvin is one of those characters that outlived this volume of Machine Man to appear elsewhere. I think at some point it was theorized that he might actually be a mutant on the order of Forge of the X-Men, in that his intuitive grasp of advanced technology, despite his total lack of schooling or training, somewhat mirrors Forge's own mutant power to do that with technology. But anyway, he's a real pro, and as he says to Machine Man, "Yeah, I'm into engines, not body work, but I'll do my best." And he encounters the Man-Wolf, too. Little CGS in joke there.
What a revolting development.
Thanks, Murd.
Yeah, he's not chomping a cigar, but in my mind, he is. That cigar is part of my headcanon for this issue. So he sets about fixing Machine Man's face, while Machine Man paces around and reflects on what's been going on in his life lately. So his face is fixed temporarily, but after that's taken care of, a new fresh hell awaits him at work. And work for Machine Man at this point in his career is at the Delmar Insurance Company, where we get to meet some of his co-workers, his boss, Byron Benjamin, office cut-up Eddie Harris, whose hilarious character foible is compulsive gambling and crippling financial problems that accompany it. Funny stuff. And also the two office heartthrobs, wholesome, virtuous blonde Pamela Quinn and sardonic, sassy brunette Maggie Jones, who introduces us for one panel to her brother, Brock Jones. She's like, "Hey, this is my brother, Brock Jones." "Hi," says Brock. And that's all we get. But Marvel fans of the period will remember that Brock Jones is the alter ego of a character called the Torpedo, whom Marvel was attempting to leverage.
Oh, that's right. Well done, Murd.
I did not make that connection. That's great.
Well, yeah, they didn't really give us much to go on here, Paul. But I'm a little surprised they didn't try to plug that character a little further, but they just kind of tossed him in there for one panel and then tossed him right out again.
Now that's the torpedo. I just had a piece of popcorn. Jeez. That was the torpedo that was in the Daredevil books, right?
Yeah, the one in the flying suit with the turbines attached to it.
He was eventually killed in Rom, wasn't he?
He was, yes. And the flying suit was passed on to a young lady named Miki Musashi, who became a member of the New Warriors as Turbo. So yeah, we don't see him in the costume in this comic, although he's just in that one panel. So shrug and move on.
But we have hit upon a character who was killed and has not been resurrected.
Yeah, how about that?
That's after the last issue. That's an event.
It is a Marvel rarity, to be sure. But okay, what the Delmar Insurance Company is up to in this final issue of Machine Man is they're working on a prototype of a super embassy building, which they're trying to market to countries who have a diplomatic presence in war-torn foreign countries. And it's got all kinds of technological bells and whistles that are supposed to make it completely bomb-proof, invasion-proof, terrorist-proof. And Delmar has decided that the best way to exhibit this new creation of theirs to prospective buyers is to throw a masquerade party there on Halloween night. Yeah, there's no way anything can go wrong with that plan. Anyway, Aaron Stack, alias Machine Man, is doing a preliminary inspection of the place when he notices a shady character whom he immediately identifies as a notorious gangster, because apparently he's memorized the faces of every notorious gangster in New York, taking pictures. So he switches into his Machine Man persona and trails the gangster back to his hideout by negating gravity. Apparently Machine Man could do that. He could float through the air at will, and magnetizing his hand to the gangster's car, which takes him back to the gang's hideout. And it's there that we're introduced to the character who is the main reason why I chose this comic for me to discuss on this episode of Back to the Bins. Machine Man number 19 is the first appearance of the Marvel villain Jack-O-Lantern. In fact, this story is entitled Jolted by Jack-O-Lantern. So, like Dead Man Dead Again number 1, chosen by Ian, this too is kind of appropriate to the recently concluded Halloween holiday because it's taking place around Halloween in the Marvel Universe 1980, and it also introduces Jack-O-Lantern, who is described on the first page as the most merciless mercenary of all. And astute Marvel fans know that although we are not given much about Jack-O-Lantern's secret ID or background in this story, he tells us that he used to work for the government, and he turned to terror for the money, basically, to turn a profit. But eventually we learn that his real name is Jason Philip Masondale Jr., and he is destined to go on to become the second Hobgoblin.
Yes.
Well, I guess there are a couple of other hoods who wore the costume in between time. A guy named Lefty Donovan comes to mind, but he's the second enduring Hobgoblin.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, technically he's like the third and a half. Like, there's been some retcons as to who wore the Hobgoblin suit first.
Are you giving Ned Leeds half? Since they killed him and put the suit on him?
He gets like an 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like the second long-term Hobgoblin. Anyway, he eventually becomes the Hobgoblin, and I think he ended up being the Hobgoblin longer than, well, for a while they're longer than anybody else. I think probably longer even than the original guy who was eventually revealed to be Roderick Kingsley did. But at this point, we're just meeting him in his original costumed identity of Jack-O-Lantern, and he has gathered this group of local thugs and hired muscle, and he trains them mercilessly and psychologically abuses them. And every time he speaks, it's in these big, jagged word balloons, so I guess we're supposed to assume that he shouts everything that he says. And his costume design is kind of it's classic Ditko. It's great looking. It's like a green scaled chainmail tunic over a darker green bodysuit. He's got flared gloves and buccaneer boots, a belt that's studded with these spherical gas grenades that are kind of like pumpkin bombs, but not really. And of course, he flies around on the awe-inspiring Pogo platform. Not quite as cool or as fast or maneuverable as a bat glider, or a goblin glider, but it's bouncier.
It's got that going for it.
Tactical advantages in close-up combat, I don't know, but
I was going to say, Murd, one of my favorite things about the design of the costume is just how much bigger his left eye is than his right.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
It's the asymmetrical Yeah, that's a Ditko early 80s touch there, which was actually not retained by future artists who would draw Jack-o'-lantern. And most of the other elements of Ditko's design were retained, but the head, the pumpkin head, the weird thing about it in this issue is it looks smaller than a normal adult human head would be, let alone big enough to have a normal adult human head hidden under it. So, yeah, future artists would expand the pumpkin quite a bit and also make the eyes, the same size.
Wasn't the Jack-o'-lantern taken out or killed at one point in Civil War or... Oh, what am I...
If I remember correctly, after he took on the role of Hobgoblin, someone else took over his role, and I think that character was killed off.
Right. The second Jack-o'-lantern was named Stephen Levins. He first appeared in Grunwald's Captain America run as a member of the Red Skull's skeleton crew. But yeah, you're right. He was the one that was killed. And also in between there was another person, a cousin of Quentin Beck, a.k.a. Mysterio, who adopted the identity and gimmickry of Jack-o'-lantern, but used special effects gimmickry that she inherited from her late cousin, Mysterio, to make her version of Jack-o'-lantern appear more supernatural.
I bow before your encyclopedic knowledge.
Would she
Paul,
be
we do
called...
it every week.
I happily accept your veneration.
Would she be called Jackie Lantern?
No,
Oh my God.
Nobody realized she was female at that point. And besides which, she was collaborating with Daniel Burkhart, who was another special effects master who had trained under Quentin Beck and had also assumed the identity of Mysterio at some point.
Was
So
that the one? I'm going to just again, I don't even try to keep up with you here. But is Danny Burkhart the one who was in Spider-Man where he'd pull the mask off and there was no head underneath it? Like that was one of his gimmicks. He had basically a mask that made his head invisible, and he had that underneath the fishbowl helmet. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. It sounds like something he would do.
And I'm thinking that was the second Mysterio, and that was Danny Burkhart.
Mm-hmm.
But I could be mistaken.
Yep, I don't think you are, Paul. I think that is the way that breaks down.
I appreciate how many Spider-Man villains have cousins that are also villains.
It's in Spider-Man's world, and this is one of my criticisms, although I love it. But in Spider-Man's world, it's a very, very small world because everyone is a supervillain or a superhero.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Everybody within 3 degrees of separation of Peter Parker has been a hero or a villain at some time.
Yep.
You sell them a pair of shoes, and within 3 months you're going to be wearing a costume.
And that was actually one of the few criticisms I had of Homecoming was the fact that, the Vulture ended up being the father of Liz Allen. It's just, it just makes the world too small.
Yeah, but it's a classic Marvel gimmick, though.
Gaze upon the mastery of the shoe.
But I'm sorry to keep interrupting your telling of this tale.
No, it's quite all right, Paul. This is all part of the fun of this format. We can just jump in with a fun little addenda anytime we want. All right, so anyway, Machine Man encounters Jack-o'-lantern at his hideout, which is an abandoned rec center, and he actually falls through the roof because he's 850 pounds. And this is just like 2 pages after we're told that he can negate gravity. And apparently when he alights on this roof, he forgets that fact and crashes through and then as he lands with a thud on the floor below, he thinks to himself, oh, no time to negate gravity. And I think that was probably stuck in there after the fact by writer or editor who realized, oh, yeah, that's right, this plot point doesn't make sense because Machine Man has this power. But anyway, that precipitates, literally and figuratively, the battle between Machine Man and Jack-o'-lantern, which ends with Jack-o'-lantern and his gang getting away. But then, in the course of that battle, Machine Man's face, his synthetic human face, is damaged again. And he feels the berserker rage welling up in him immediately, but he manages to compose himself. And he gets out into the fresh air, does some more introspection. But he's got a duty to perform. Delmar Insurance Company needs him to go to the opening of the Super Embassy and just be on hand to make sure nothing goes wrong. All of his co-workers are going to be there in Halloween costumes. So he buys a Superman mask from a kid on the street trick-or-treating. And puts it on over his bare, robotic Machine Man face. And at some point, of course, someone yanks the Superman mask off, and we get the big reveal. And everybody thinks that this is, a part of his costume. Haha. Then Jack-o'-lantern and his gang arrive and proceed to sabotage the Super Embassy prototype. The story doesn't really make it clear how they're going to be monetizing this scheme of theirs. I assume it's going to be either they're doing this because they've been hired by one of Delmar's competitors who want Delmar's big upfront to fail, or B, they're doing this to prove that the Super Embassy can be cracked and they'll sell the secret of how they did it to any terrorist cell that wants to do the same thing to a Super Embassy that opens in another country. But anyway, the point is Jack-O-Lantern and his gang successfully break in and start creating havoc. Machine Man is able to stop them. He mind melds with the central computer and shuts all the malfunctioning equipment down. And then he wades into battle and battles off Jack-O-Lantern and his goons. And he ends up successfully knocking Jack out by enveloping him in a highly charged magnetic field as one of Jack's concussion grenades goes off in his hand. His armor is enough to protect Jack from lethal harm, but he is at least knocked unconscious. And Machine Man strides away as he gets the hairy eyeball from the human ingrates who fear and distrust him and don't appreciate that he just saved all of their lives.
Apparently, including Albert Einstein.
What about Albert Einstein?
He looks to be one of the humans who's given him the hairy eyeball there.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean.
just I don't know. When I saw it, I was like, wait, what the hell is that? Sorry.
Yeah, either him or a Halloween simulation. So Machine Man pays one last visit to Gears Garvin to get a tune-up to his brain, which apparently was the psychological problems he's been having. And then he once again walks out into the night air. He does an very introspective robot, this guy. And he mutters to himself, I intend to be around for a long, long time. Ironic last words for the last page of the last issue of his series. But he does mention to Garvin and Dr. Spaulding before he does this that he's going to take a leave of absence from Delmar Insurance Company, and I'm pretty sure that he never did go back, which is why those supporting cast members like Eddie Harris, the gambler, and Pam Quinn, the old-fashioned, long-suffering Marvel love interest, I don't think they were ever seen again. But anyway, there you go. Machine Man, the final issue of that series, first appearance of Jack-O-Lantern, all of it underneath a cover, lest I forget, drawn by, of all people, Frank Miller, with inks by Terry Austin. So somewhere there exists original Frank Miller artwork of Machine Man battling a guy with a pumpkin on his head.
Actually, he's making a face at him. He's like,
Neener, neener, neener.
Yeah, it's drawn to be much sillier than the story really is.
Yeah.
It almost looks like this should have the assistant editor's stamp on it.
oh my God, we had the precursor to Fat Thor on this cover. Frank Miller was a visionary.
And it's also a completely different Jack-O-Lantern costume. Like, not anywhere near what it looks like on the inside.
It's Dormammu.
Oh God, you're right.
This color scheme, the purple with the orange, yeah.
And we have a Batman and Superman way back there in the back.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got the overweight Invisible Woman. We've got scrawny Hulk. A lot of off-model.
Oh, the lady over here, she's a Silver Surfer. I didn't see the surfboard until now.
I didn't either.
Me neither. Yeah, I thought she was just some, I don't know, the CDC employee or something. But no, yeah, I didn't see this before either. Great cat.
All right, Murd, I can't thank you enough for choosing this. As many, you all know, I love Ditko's work. I've never read any of his Machine Man stuff. I knew he took over after Kirby left the book. But reading this story, and I've totally forgotten he introduced Jack-O-Lantern. So on many levels, Murd, I really enjoyed your selection. But okay, I have to read a thought balloon. Because when I read this thought balloon, I stood up in my chair and did a touchdown pose. So, and by the way, I have to comment, Marvel Unlimited, to navigate this is such crap. Can they make the site more difficult to find things and even just to look at a damn book? Like, maybe it's just me because I'm primitive, but ugh.
Oh no, the actual browsing of series could be way easier.
Ian, my God! So I'm not totally crazy then when I say that. It's holy mackerel. So, all right, I don't know what page I'm on, but it's the first couple of pages. So he's with his cohorts at the insurance company, and he's infatuated with the blonde girl. No, I'm sorry, he's infatuated with the brunette girl, and the blonde girl's infatuated with him. And she's thinking, Aaron's thinking, Pam, you affect my circuitry in weird and wonderful ways, but you need a man of flesh, not metal. And then she thinks, Aaron, can't you see that I love you? And I stood up, arms in a touchdown gesture, just shouting with glee, because I felt like I was back reading like Spider-Man from the early Silver Age by Leon Ditko. Because it's that same, template essentially, right down to the gambling guy, who I thought was hilarious because like they're making light of this guy. Obviously, it's a terrible addiction. He's probably destroying his entire life. But he's almost like this dark version of Foggy Nelson with like the bow tie and this and that. But I also found really fascinating was apparently there's moments in the story where based on damage he received in an earlier battle that he's losing control of his passion, so to speak, and he's like getting to like these berserker rages. And I'm wondering if that's Ditko imposing through the plot his sort of views on life. Did Murd notice that several times Aaron's like, I have to control myself, like I'm losing control of like my balance, so to speak, and he's like trying to keep his emotions in check.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if that was DeFalco or if that was Ditko kind of through the plot saying, okay, I want him to be going through this ordeal, because that seems to fall in line with when you read about Steve Ditko's philosophy, objectivism and so forth, and the sort of the black and white view of the world and etc. I'm wondering if that was kind of seeping in there. That's just a wild guess on my part, but I just found it fascinating that was an aspect of sort of the Machines Man character arc in this story. So.
Well, I think there's an excellent chance that Ditko was asserting himself through this arc, because he was definitely he was kind of being a martinet in as artist in this series, and trying to make his creative voice heard. Because DeFalco, I don't even remember where I read this, but he reminisced in an interview I read with him a long time ago that when he came on as writer of Machine Man towards the end, Ditko called him up and engaged him in an hour-long debate, like demanding DeFalco expound and defend his definition of heroism before Ditko would consent to work with him as writer on this Machine Man series. So I think there's every possibility, Chris, that what you say is true, and that Ditko was finding a way to make his own thoughts on the nature of heroism and humanity through his work on this Machine Man story.
I got the impression that was going to be a continuing subplot, and because the series was being canceled, they just cleaned it all up in that last page.
Yep.
And I think I thought that was also, the thought behind that last line where he said, I intend to be around for a long, long time. Just, to let you know the character's still going to exist and that they're going to make use of it in the Marvel Universe, although they really haven't done a heck of a lot with him when you think about it.
Actually, I was going to get to this. He's currently in the current Iron Man book.
No, I did not. I don't read anything that's current, so that would explain that.
Yes, he has been, but his portrayal has been kind of, I don't know. It's almost like they've made the Iron Man book its own little, like Marvel's nothing but a bunch of little side universes. Each book is its own little world that doesn't really tie into the others, because Tony Stark has figured out that he's a rebooted human. He's not the original human he was. His body was recreated.
That's from a previous volume of
right.
And they're building off of that, definitely.
And then Aaron Stack is basically pining after Jocasta. Jocasta wants to become a human, and now there's somehow Ultron has merged himself with Hank Pym, so he's like Ultron Pym.
Mm-hmm.
And through a accident that just happened, Tony is now bonded with his armor. And then actually Aaron, Machine Man came to his rescue, and not rescue yet. It's still an ongoing series, but yeah, that's the current where I didn't really like the way he's been portrayed. He's being portrayed more like a whiny 20-something.
So he's being portrayed like his Next Wave equivalent.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, which frankly has been the case with many of the characters that were in Next Wave since that series was published. Is that slowly but surely their mainstream Marvel iterations have taken on the personalities of that Next Wave series, even though at first that was just supposed to be a side series. Like definitely Boom Boom is way more like she ever was in Next Wave than she is now, and Machine Man, when he was appearing in Captain Marvel's series, was definitely more like the Next Wave version. So I think they're adopting that personality.
It's been a long time since I've read that.
Yep.
Yeah, so he is still active in the current Marvel universe.
All right. So what do I know?
You know lots of things.
Not about the current Marvel universe. I know.
Hey, I only know
precious
Iron
little.
Man. I only know Iron Man and the Avengers. That's all, and the Fantastic Four. That's the only 3 current books I buy.
Immortal Hulk and Doctor Strange, and I'm still way behind on Avengers and Iron Man and Fantastic Four, so I got to catch myself up on those.
You could always start a time bubble podcast.
Nah, I think somebody has that covered.
Oh, okay.
Time streams.
There's other time names. What did you all think about the Steve Ditko art in this one?
You know what? I appreciate it for what it is, and it is definitely a step through time, like Chris was saying. Like, it does bring you back to the Silver Age, which I appreciate. However, it is a bit inconsistent at times. At times, it even reminds me more of Kirby's work than it does of Ditko's, especially in the faces. But then there'll be random faces that are just very stiff and lifeless, and that's been one of my problems with Ditko, since I started reading him. It's not necessarily a negative for those who love and appreciate him. It's just he's never been the best with faces for me, and it becomes apparent on certain pages here that continues to be the issue in the 80s.
Well, what I love about Ditko's faces, although I can see where you're coming from when looking at a book from this period, is that one of the things, the hallmarks of his greatness as an artist, is that he draws mundane people, ugly people.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, the average human being really isn't that attractive. So, and he always captured that so well. I think in the Silver Age that was so draw dropping because you're contrasting that with, DC everybody looks like, handsome and attractive, and it's all John Q. Public white fence and that whole postcard perfect world. And you go to the Spider-Man and people, I know that guy, like I've seen that person on the street, and that was so gripping, and it still is when I look at those stories. I mean, when you see Ditko again, because art styles change, sensibilities, taste change, you get to the this is really the beginning of the Copper Age. I can see where his art style would kind of stick out, where that maybe some readers wouldn't really take to.
Right.
Because it's not like anything else that's you're seeing at this point in Marvel Comics. So I can understand that.
The other thing is that I really appreciate is that when he puts on that Superman mask, he's just basically Simon Williams. Like he looks exactly like Wonder Man.
Good point.
which is just like, all right, fine. Why did they just say he's just dressing up as Wonder Man for Halloween? Why the hell not?
Oh, another side note: they also Ultron also merged Simon Williams and the Vision into one being too.
Of course he did.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Well, just to totally try and ignore that point and talk a little bit about the art. When I look at Ditko in the 60s, the two things that really stand out, three things, because I think he's a masterful storyteller.
Oh, absolutely.
But just looking at individual images and setting the storytelling aside, what I thought he really did well in the 60s was to create outrageous fantasy worlds, which he did in Doctor Strange, and to make real solid use of shadow and light, which I thought he did a lot in Spider-Man. And I don't see a lot of any of that here. So I find it to be almost like a shell of the Ditko that I love so much. It's
That's
like this.
That's a really good point, Paul. It's a really good point.
There's some of it here. You could see. There's a little bit of it. I'm looking at what was the page? There was one page in particular where there was like a battle. Actually, the page when Machine Man falls through the roof. Like, I see some good use of shadow in that page. But otherwise, I'm not seeing a lot. And I do find it amusing that they attack him with, like, old-fashioned gym equipment, like clubs and stuff. But, and the storytelling I still think is top-notch. And some of the individual images I'm happy with, but I don't think it has the same cohesive, just comfort to the eye that I felt in the 60s. So, I've in the past I've blamed a lot of my liking of the later Ditko on inkers' fear of putting their own stamp on his artwork, but he inked himself here, so I really can't do that. So, it's not that I think it's bad, I don't, but it's just not at the level of the Ditko that I love so much.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree that this is Ditko past the peak of his powers. And I see Ian's point about Ditko and faces. I'll agree he's not the best at them. The faces here are kind of crude, but expressive. They get the emotion across pretty well, so that plays to Paul's point about the storytelling. And as far as the similarity to Kirby faces, another point that Ian made, that's probably not entirely accidental because Ditko is following Kirby's act.
Mm-hmm.
A Kirby created character here on this series.
Good point.
This is just Ditko of the early 80s. It's not exactly my cup of tea, but also important to note it wasn't really much the cup of tea of fans of the period, because a lot of them were kind of down on Ditko and even Kirby. And as Chris has pointed out in several of his historical retrospectives about Marvel in the Bronze Age and slightly afterwards, Kirby basically packed up and left Marvel because he wasn't being taken seriously by Marvel editors. People at Marvel thought he was. They called him Hack Kirby and
Jack the Hack. Yep.
Yeah. So his style and Ditko's style were kind of off trend at the beginning of the 80s. So this. One of the letter writers on the letters column of this issue say that the artwork is Machine Man stinks, the artwork is terrible, and the plots are infantile garbage. So that's I think
that's harsh.
Yeah. He went on to say that he only buys the comic for the pleasure of burning it.
Oh my God.
Yep. So it's not exactly.
Boy, I really miss customers like that.
That's not what the fandom of the early 80s was clamoring for.
Today, Murd, we call that a YouTuber, but that's.
I think that's unfairly harsh. It's not even he's just being honest. I think it's like purposely just being nasty.
Yeah. And you know what? How hard is it to just not pick up a damn book if you don't like it? Like, it's plain and simple. If you pick up a couple issues and it's not your cup of tea, then don't pick it up anymore. There's no reason to go out of your way to yell and scream and be angry over it. It's like, okay, clearly somebody at Marvel isn't on your wavelength. Like, move on and go ahead and read something you actually like. It dingbat.
Yeah.
I feel like you're speaking right to me. Because that's exactly what I did.
Good on you, Bill.
All right, so we ready to rate this one?
You bet.
Okay. Cover. It's Miller, but I'm not that big a fan of Miller in general, and as we've pointed out before, he's not really doing any justice to Ditko's character design for Jack, for example. I'm not giving it any better than a B. The Ditko interiors themselves, again, I really like his costume design for Jack-O-Lantern, but it's not the best Ditko any of us have ever seen, so I'm just going to give that a B too. The story, it's got a number of plot holes. DeFalco is one of my least favorite writers, actually. If it weren't for the introduction of Jack-O-Lantern, I'd probably give this a D. As it is, I'll give it a C for story. So I think overall it's going to amount to like a B- at best.
Well,
Yeah.
Paul, this has to be your favorite cover because it's got lots of that thing you love in the cover.
Well, Terry Austin was a fan of using the Zipatone, and it's funny because when you read interviews
Well,
with
not
him,
Zipatone. I
he
meant more like
complained about it.
blank
Oh, the
space.
the stark white background. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's enough action in the foreground and enough people in the background that the white background doesn't really bother me all that much in this particular one. But I like Adam, I have a problem with the fact that he totally just disregarded the character design and drew Jack-O-Lantern the way he felt like drawing him. I don't really get that. I don't understand that at all.
I wonder if the whole Nina is just that, disregarding the whole character design, going like.
I'm wondering if it's a show of disrespect for Ditko by fellow creators, not only readers, and that would really bother me even more.
Paul, what I think it probably was, and what's probably closer to the truth, at least this is what I'm hoping, is that he wasn't actually told what the character design was. Because that would happen all the damn time, and still even happens today sometimes in comics, where you're told that a character is going to appear on a cover, and you draw them, and then before you know it, you've drawn the wrong costume, and then you open up the page, and it has a completely different costume on the side.
That is possible, and that would be the most kind way to look at this. So yeah. We'll run with that, because we don't like to necessarily think bad things about people. I would say the cover is, except for the lack of character design, of using the character model, I don't mind the way it's drawn at all. I think it's pretty solid, but I don't think it's, I don't think it's iconic by any stretch. So I'm pretty much in agreement with Murd that it's a B. The interior art, I'm giving it a B, but I think that's more out of nostalgia for Ditko than it is actually looking at the artwork within this particular book. I think there's enough problems with it and enough simplistically drawn things that it could get a lower grade, but I'm just loath to give Ditko anything lower than a B. I guess the area where I disagree with you is I'm a little bit more. I enjoyed the story a little bit more, despite some of the plot holes and some of the just stereotypical characters that they use here, and I think some of that might be some nostalgia. Just as Chris pointed out earlier about like the line that sounds like it comes right out of a 1960s Stan Lee written story. So I'm going B's all around here, and I'm just gonna give the book a B.
I'm again, Paul. I echo your sentiments for this book as well. It's straight B. I'm a huge Miller fan, but the cover I didn't find particularly captivating. I mean, it was certainly solid. I've always enjoyed the Jack-O-Lantern design, and one of the joys for this selection, again, Murd, I'm so glad you picked it, was that I had totally forgotten that he was introduced in Machine Man and designed by Ditko. So it was a thrill to see that. I just find this a very serviceable book in the sense that it's very solid. And the story kept my interest, but like Paul was saying, a lot of that was really rooted in my nostalgia and love for Ditko's work. And I'm glad Marvel, was printing some of his work. I mean, he always had a difficult relationship with Marvel throughout the years, but they're printing some of his work in the very late 70s or early 80s. I think it comes back one more time in the 90s to create Speedball, if I remember correctly. But this is. I mean, it's a forgettable story. It's not a book I would return to and read over and over again as I might with other stories. But really fun. I love the history, the Jack-O-Lantern character. And it's just any chance to look at Ditko's work from whatever period. I mean, this is not like some of you fellows were saying. This is not my favorite period of Steve Ditko's work, and I agree with you, Paul. You really miss the atmospherics and the use of darks that you see in some of his classic work from the Silver Age and stuff he was doing at Warren Publishing and so forth, Charlton, etc. But Murd, I really enjoyed just kind of taking this trip down sort of like semi-amnesia lane. So Thanks, man.
Glad you enjoyed it, Chris.
Yep.
All right, I go ahead and give the cover a solid B minus. It's far from my favorite Frank Miller cover I've ever seen. The Terry Austin inks, the cross hatching specifically on that Silver Surfer woman, I just kind of hate. It's just it almost makes her look see through in the way that it's done. I just really don't like it at all. Do appreciate that there's sort of like an R. Crumb-esque, mad personality to the costumes on it, and the fact that he fit both Batman and Superman in it and on the background is funny enough. But yeah, it's about a B minus for me. Art is also going to be a B minus. My major problem with it more than anything else is the lack of depth in any of the fight scenes. Like it almost looks like everything, like the perspective is off. And I know that's something that Ditko works with, regularly, is that his style can be a bit flatter at times. But as has been mentioned by others already, just because of the era he was working in and what have you, I would have loved to have seen more depth to the art, and I just really didn't get that. So B minus for me on that. The story, to harken back to the days of the Amazing Spider-Cast, the long lost Spider-Man podcast that I used to guest on occasionally. DeFalco, that was something we would say on a regular basis, and this is some of the weakest DeFalco I've read. I would give I'm being generous with a C on the writing. It's Stan-like, and I understand what he was going for with that pastiche, but just overall, it just feels like he's mimicking more than he's actually writing.
I have to step in for a minute because I always have to defend Tom DeFalco, because we always have these friendly disagreements. I think this is early in his career, number one, so I can see why he's doing the mimicry here. If you get later on to DeFalco's work, and it's uneven. I don't totally disagree with Murd. I don't like everything he's done. I do think he did some pretty solid work on Amazing Spider-Man. I loved his Spider-Girl comic that he did.
Spider-Girl comic is one of my favorites as well. I completely agree.
Yeah, but this is. I'm assuming this is early in his career, so it's nothing that is going to make it Tom DeFalco greatest hits compilation. But
100%, man, 100%.
The letters page to Machine Man number 19 contains one of the kindest critiques of DeFalco's writing I've ever read. Tom's imagination surpasses his script writing abilities.
Damn, the Machine Man letter writers were harsh.
Oh my God.
Holy mackerel.
Is that a polite way of saying his reach exceeds his grasp?
Sounds like it.
Basically, yeah.
He had good ideas, but lacked the skill to execute them.
And overall, just a B minus. So solid B minus for me.
I guess I'm the last one. The cover.
Let it go, Bill. Don't worry about trying to not insult us.
Well, no. I mean, I actually like. I mean, it's Miller and Austin. It's not a bad pairing, but for once, Paul, I'm in agreement. I wish there was a little bit more on this cover in the background. The white, although the white does make the various costumes stand out a little better, but it's still nothing better than a B or a C minus cover wise. The interior art, I like Steve Ditko, but I know this is sacrilege. I like him more in the Doctor Strange universe than I do the Spider-Man universe. That's just my preference.
It's not sacrilege. I think that's a fair opinion. I don't necessarily share it, but it's a fair opinion.
Right. So, for me, the art, it's like a C plus, B minus. It's and the story, yeah. I'm wondering if this whole super embassy thing, being as this would be the 80s, was this influenced by real world events, i.e., example, the Iranian embassy?
This would be close in time to after the hostages were released.
That happened 40 years ago as we're recording this today, in 1979.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's kind of odd that we would be covering this book that mentions something like this, and that was out back then. So, story-wise, I'm still gonna just give it a C. So for me, it's a C book. C for comic book.
Oh.
There you go.
And unfortunately, gentlemen, I need to step away, and because I have to be up very early in the morning. But I hate to critique and run. But Paul, should I leave? Stay connected, just mute, because I'm not sure if I disconnect. But that way,
Well, I think it will.
Of the recording.
I think just for the purposes of a backup, if you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
I will do that. I will let it run, and then when you close out the call, it should close.
All right. Thanks for making time to get on at all. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Take care, sir.
I'll see all you guys later. Look forward to seeing you all sometime in the future again, or for the first time.
Sounds good. Take care, man. Good talking with you again.
You too.
All right. See you guys later. Bye.
Good night.
All right, Chris, you're up.
Okay, so I chose The Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, issue 114. Copyright 1982. The creative team is the writers. Is it Doug Monk?
I always thought it was Mensch. Or Munch.
I want it to be Munch. I want it to be Mensch just because I like saying Mensch.
Yeah, I think Monk is how we discovered. I mean, for the longest time, Paul, I thought it was Mensch too, but I think we learned in the early days of CGS that it is in fact Monk.
Because long before I was involved in the show, the fellas interviewed him.
Oh, okay. Well, then I think we got to go with that as the definitive pronunciation.
Always a favorite writer of mine. Besides Doug Monk's scripting, the other main reason I chose this book is that it's pencil and inked by the late great Gene Day, who died at the age of 31 in 1982. Wow. So the same year this book came out. Christy Shield colors, Jim Novak letterer. If you're an 80s Marvel fan, all these names should be familiar. Ralph Macchio is the editor, and of course Jim Shooter, as Murd mentioned earlier, this is his era as the editor-in-chief. Now, there's certain, and I've talked about this book on CGS on more than one occasion. We did a Shang-Chi spotlight, for example. But there are certain books, when I look at my whole history of reading comics, that had such an indelible impact on me that to the point where it made me aware of what comic books were capable of, and how they weren't just funny books per se when you go by some of the sort of popular culture stereotypes. And I got this book in 1982, so I was 9 years old. And even at that, tender age, I realized I was reading something that wasn't like most of the comics I had read up to that point. And as I've read this story hundreds of times since then, and each time I look at it, it really does take my breath away. And I realize, there's certain, like in any art form, there's certain moments where the medium transcends, and it's more than just what people expect it to be. And from the moment you open the cover and you see the splash page and you go, well, this should be in a museum. Like, this is some of the most breathtaking art I've certainly up to that point as a kid, and then even beyond that, I've ever seen in a comic. And I'll do a quick plot summary in just a moment. I just have to pontificate for a moment, because every time I look at this book, it reminds me of why I love the comic book medium. So, as many people no doubt know, Shang-Chi has been a mainstay of the Marvel Universe since he was introduced in the early Bronze Age. I want to say he was introduced in Marvel Special Edition before he got his own title.
Well, he was introduced in Special Edition, I think, issue 15. And I think it stayed Special Edition 15 and 16, and by 17 it was called Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu.
Absolutely clutch. If Murd's bringing the ammunition to me in the foxhole, you're getting the ammunition ready at the supply depot, sir.
I appreciate it. And just to take that a step further, not that I can compete with Mr. Murd, but just to take it a step further, before issue 15, it was a Thor reprint series.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. You know your business. Well done. So, And Shang-Chi had a lengthy run. I mean, the book ran to issue 125, I believe, something like that.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, maintaining that special edition numbering, which is common for many Marvel books when they would cross over from like a multiple feature title to a single character title book. And Shang-Chi originally began as he was clearly inspired by, the kung fu craze, that was sweeping the United States early 70s. I mean, Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, one of my favorite films, is a classic example of that. Iron Fist was born from that same, sort of zeitgeist. But Shang-Chi had legs because the book long surpassed the kung fu craze, and they're making a movie for him now in the MCU. So the character has been around; he's got quite a history. And Gene Day, who was a Canadian artist who died of a coronary at the age of 31, apparently he was so dedicated to his work that he just spent endless hours, slaving away at his drawing board. When you look at the detail of the artwork here, which he also inked, you can imagine that.
It reminds me of Mike Deodato's work a little bit.
I would say Mike Deodato's work reminds people of Gene Day's work.
And that is fair.
I'm going to be very reverent here because this is one of my all-time favorite artists in the comic book medium. And it's not just this book. I've looked a lot of stuff. I mean, he didn't actually do that much because he didn't live that long, but he did a fairly lengthy run on Master of Kung Fu. And in this period in the character's history, Shang-Chi was in the story was the son of Fu Manchu, and as many people know, Marvel had the rights to those pulp characters for a period of time, and then they lost it, which is why the Shang-Chi books were reprinted in trade for many years. It was only just recently, in the past few years, they did a beautiful 4-omnibus collection because they got the rights back of the whole series. And the basic gist was that Shang-Chi broke away from his father and his empire and tried to go out on his own and live an ethical, upright life away from his father's, corrosive influence. And he ends up working for British intelligence. And at this point in the series, he's kind of off away from that, but he's still doing work for Nayland Smith, who's another pulp character who's now doing kind of like a freelance intelligence business. And he is sent on a mission to – is it Hong Kong or China? I don't remember.
Kong.
What's that?
It's Hong Kong.
Thanks, Murd. And basically, Fu Manchu is dead at this point, in air quotes, in the story, but his minions are still active. And Fu Manchu had a cult of highly skilled warriors sworn to him unto death called the Sai-Fan. And they're almost like mystical beings, and they had this really. I mean, with Gene Day's artwork, they had this amazing armor, and one of them is sent to assassinate a couple, a woman who's used an elixir that gave her sort of everlasting youth that Fu Manchu used, and her aging blind archer. And Doug Monk based this on, I believe, a Chinese fable, and it's called A Fantasy of the Autumn Moon. And the gist of the story is that Shang-Chi, who's always it's a theme throughout the character's arc. He's always sort of torn about, what he's doing. He talks about like games of deceit and death. And he'd really like to be a fisherman, and he's kind of struggling with his role as a warrior and why he's doing what he's doing and who he's working for, and so forth. And in this story, he goes to see the couple to try to protect them from the Sai-Fan. And Monk weaves the Chinese fable into this Shang-Chi adventure. And ultimately, the Sai-Fan tracks down the couple, because even though Fu Manchu's dead, the Sai-Fan is still intends to carry out his mission. And Shang-Chi, takes him on in mortal hand-to-hand combat, which is incredibly breathtaking in terms of the artwork. I mean, Gene Day knew how to stage a martial arts fight. And, the story ultimately ends tragically. And Shang-Chi, he survives, but nobody else does. And they remind you what a lonely path he walks as the warrior. And that's I don't want to go into it too much because I really want people to read this story. It's Master of Kung Fu 114. But for me, the artwork in this book is on another level. I I don't even know how he did this, because I don't know how long did it take him to produce this? Because he was on a monthly schedule, and I could see why the guy might have maybe even worked himself to death. I don't want to say that definitively, but the talent and skill and dedication that went into just this one issue is breathtaking. Like when we talked about in the Machine Man book, how some of us were kind of disappointed with, Ditko wasn't at his prime and the art felt, in many ways felt kind of rote. You're on a whole nother level with this one here. The level of detail in armor, in surroundings, in combat, the use of lights and darks. Christy Shields' coloring is also very important to the story. This is, for me, comic books as literature. So that's why I chose it.
I want to start by mentioning that I didn't have access to this issue, so I started looking online to try and find what I could. I've recently developed an interest in getting my collection of Master of Kung Fu comics together. So far I think I have 25 issues in my collection. And when I go to shows, I've been looking in the dollar bins and the $2 bins and seeing what holes I'm able to fill. But I didn't have this one. And I found it, Bill and I, for a Halloween episode, actually, we had an issue of House of Mystery that we didn't have access to. And Bill's daughter had found it on a website, so I plugged it into the website to see if I could find it, and that's actually where I was able to get a hold of this. So I just want to give a plug to that, because if people want to see this book, there's a website called Read Comic Online. And then there's a search bar at the top of it, and I put in Master of Kung Fu, and it gave me a list of issues, and 114 was one of them, so I was able to click on it and read it online, at no cost. So if anybody, wants to see what Chris is talking about with this artwork, that is available to you at no cost, so that's kind of nice. I assume it's somehow licensed because it's such an open website that I'm just thinking it's probably, Marvel would have a cease and desist going if it wasn't. So somehow they must have either these books are available or they licensed it somehow, whatever, or at least I hope that's the case.
It's definitely not licensed. That much I can 100% tell you. It's one of those websites that somehow still survives, even though many others have been shut down. But I can 100% confirm to you that that's not a licensed website.
Okay, well,
and you can also read it on Marvel Unlimited too, but you have to pay for that.
Yeah, I hate to promote stuff that's going to be that I'm hurting somebody with, but that's
I have 100% used that website myself, whether I like it or not, occasionally. So I understand why people might go that route. As long as people go ahead and buy some other comics to even it out, then I'm A-okay with that.
Okay, there you go. That's definitely one way of looking at it with balance. I just, the big thing as I was going through this issue is I am, as Chris said, I'm overwhelmed by the artwork. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And one of the things that really jumped out at me is the splash page. Gene Day felt clearly so proud of his work on that splash page that he signed it, which you don't usually see that on interior art.
Yep.
So,
and let's also mention that there are multiple 2-page spreads in this story as well.
Oh.
And they're not two-page spreads where the artist is taking a day off to.
No.
I drew one two-page spread and it's got two characters fighting each other and that's it. No, these are 2-page spreads with multiple panels on them and a lot of detail work.
Well, and the other thing, mentioning the coloring beforehand, especially during this era, like you before the days of digital coloring could be so hit or miss.
Yep.
It could be something where, say for like some of the earlier issues of Sandman, way on it in comics, or of course some of the other issues that have, like Brian Boland did that since recolored because he felt like he didn't quite capture what he wanted back in the day, so he went ahead and redid it. It's such a hit or miss process, and this is some of the best coloring, period, that I have seen in a comic from this era, and I just have to applaud that. It's to begin with, the pencils are great as is, but it just adds that extra layer to the artwork, and the shading and the shadowing and the depth that is just so rich and fluid, and it's marvelous to behold. It really is.
It is, and yet this is also artwork that if it were in black and white, I would still be in awe of it.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We should point out also that the Master of Kung Fu series, in almost all of it, was written by Doug Monk. Doug Monk didn't create Shang-Chi. It was created by Jim Starlin and oh hell, it's like I'm failing here terribly.
Give me 1 minute and I'll find out for you.
Englehart, I believe. And they wrote the first couple issues, and then Monk took over. The character is his baby. Like he totally developed the world of Shang-Chi, and he was working with Paul Gulacy, Mike Zeck, and then Gene Day. So when you read the whole series, there's a level of sophistication in it that you're not going to see in a lot of other comics. And the Bronze Age you see currently they sort of up the ante in sophistication. A lot of Marvel books in the 70s going into the 80s, but this one for me is in a class by itself. And by the time you get to the Gene Day era, which is near the end of the title's run, Monk is just firing on all cylinders because he knows his characters so well because he's developed them now over several years. And for me, the day sort of era of Shang-Chi is the culmination of everything that's just great about the character, and he has a great supporting cast as well. And when you wrap that in with this artwork, you're getting comics at their peak, when it comes to what you're seeing in the 1980s. And as Ian mentioned, the coloring is just one, fabulous example of that.
Does anybody else think the cabbie on page 7 is De Niro?
Oh, let me take a look. The cabbie on page 7.
Yeah, like right when he's in the cab.
Yeah, I see that.
I see the image you're talking about. I'm not necessarily seeing De Niro. I'm not telling you you're wrong by any stretch, but I'm not really seeing it. I almost feel like, and I don't think this is intentional, but I almost feel like I see more Sylvester Stallone in that face than De Niro.
Yeah, I can see that also.
Well, there's a tradition in Shang-Chi, especially when Gulacy was doing the book, that he would pattern certain characters after movie actors in terms of their faces. So
yeah, that could be Stallone. Good point.
Whether it's De Niro or Stallone or otherwise, it's a Hong Kong version of Sane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dialogue tells us he's not American.
Yeah. Yep.
And, well, and the blind archer to me almost looks like Fred Mertz from I Love Lucy. So what can I say? But it's I kind of like the fact that the characters are all very distinctive in how they're drawn, and I love the fact that the art, the layouts of the pages and the panel structure and everything is all very, very, it's changing page to page. There's no set. Oh, here we have 9-panel grids. There's no such thing as a 9-panel grid in here. Every page has a very distinctive layout as far as how it's, how the panel work is done. I remember hearing something. I don't remember what podcast they were talking about, but somebody was talking at one time about almost like lessons that people took in how to navigate through a comic from panel to panel, which almost seems so instinctive that you would never need any kind of lesson. But this book is almost like it's teaching the lesson, because we're going to just throw so many different layouts at you that you're going to have to be able to do it somehow or another.
Oh, this book is a master class. I mean, there's such a cinematic feel to it. I mean, each page, you can just go to each page and spend a significant amount of time just appreciating the storytelling and the sense of design and layout, and how each panel is something new to look at. I mean, I'm looking on. This is near the end where he's about to face the Sci-Fan in final battle, and he sees, and it's a dark panel where he just sees a leaf falling in front of Shang-Chi's face, and that kind of lets him know where his opponent is. It's the suspension, like the sense of suspense, in just that one panel. What'd you guys think of the martial arts scenes in this book?
Oh, they're outstanding. I mean, all that talk I had about lack of life and movement in the Machine Man issue, I feel the pages moving as I was reading this, like almost like I was watching an animation. That's how fluid everything felt, and how much depth and perspective there was to each.
And it's worth noting, because we're fawning deservedly so over the artwork so much, but the story is pretty deep and pretty significant. I mean, earlier you mentioned with regard to the artwork, Chris, you called it cinematic, and I think the story is as well. To me, it feels like a combination of kind of Enter the Dragon and James Bond, which I think is what we're supposed to be getting from Master of Kung Fu at all times. Yeah. But that's the way it feels. It's kind of, it just feels like you're entering a very rich world here. And as I mentioned earlier, I have had my interest in this character kindled. I can't even say rekindled, because it's not a character I was particularly into. But I've had it kindled recently, and I've been picking up issues, and my desire is to get them and then do a full read through of the series. And just from this issue alone, I don't think I'm going to be disappointed when I do.
No, you won't be. I mean, this issue for me is one of the standouts of the entire series. And also, this is a one and done, which you get. There's so little of that in comics today. If they were going to do a Shang-Chi TV series, this would be an episode. Like, they could just take this story, transfer it to television if they do it properly, and it would be amazing. Murd, what were your thoughts?
All right. Chris, you remembered correctly that you provided me a copy of this.
Yes.
Because Chris is he's a spreader of the gospel of Master of Kung Fu number 114. This is one that he really wanted me to experience. So he, out of his own stores, his own stock at the former Wild Pig Comics, gave me a copy of number 114 for my very own. And I sat down and I read it for the first time, and I fell asleep on it. I could tell that it was good, that it was well done, but I just wasn't connecting with it for whatever reason. So I just said, okay, that was a good comic, and I put it aside and didn't think of it again. But then Chris decided to visit it in a more formal, the discussive format here on Back to the Bins, and so I found the copy that he gave me, and I read it again, and I'm completely ensorcelled by it, Chris. I mean, I think now I come much closer to seeing what's in it. And you know what I think the problem was? The first time I read it, it was not autumn.
Aha!
Context is everything for me,
Yes.
Chris, the consumer of popular culture, of art, you name it. It's my tastes and perceptions cycle with the seasons, and this is absolutely an autumn story. I mean, this thing is just drenched in autumnal imagery. I mean, the title of it is A Fantasy of the Autumn Moon. The story is set during the Festival of the Autumn Moon in Hong Kong, which we're told is in turn based on this ancient Chinese legend of the princess and her blind archer, and the waters of the immortal pool of the dragons and all of that. So I think that no wonder I wasn't quite connecting with it the first time around. I was just reading it at the wrong time of year. But now I'm in the right autumnal set, and I am just I'm floored by what I've encountered in this comic, having read it for the second time. I'm absolutely seeing things that only kind of made a blip on my mental radar the first time I half-consciously flipped through it months ago. I absolutely agree with everything that's been said about the artwork. It's exquisitely detailed. It's just a perfect half step between fine art and sequential art. I mean, oftentimes when artists who work in comics try to elevate what they're doing to the level of fine visual arts, it's the kinetic quality of comic artwork is what's sacrificed in that process. That's a criticism that's often leveled at Alex Ross. He paints pretty pictures, but they're often pretty static and don't convey like movement or action or sequence of events. Gene Day has no such problem here. Ian put it very well when he said that a lot of these multi-panel double-page spreads, which are brilliantly choreographed and expertly laid out. The page and panel composition is top-notch, but the action is definitely painstakingly brought across in these little panels that, as Ian said, look like you're looking at a strip of cells in an animation film. So it's the cinematic quality that you mentioned, Chris, is absolutely there. But best of all, though, it's mood. This thing is just sopping in mood, created not only in the way that Monk verbally tells the story. It's very evocative prose, and somehow he manages to weave together such disparate elements as ancient Chinese legends and early 80s Rolling Stones lyrics, and have it all hang together as a cohesive and affecting whole. But the visual dimension is just so gorgeous. The detail he puts into his artwork and just the page and panel layouts, he knows when to give us just one big image and when to give us a beautifully rendered sequence of smaller panels, and just the way that those panels are placed on a single page. I look at the page where they retell the legend of the princess and the archer.
So
and
beautiful.
The dragon rearing up out of the pool to impart his wisdom on the couple and bless their marriage. Just like the decorations around the border, it's like an illuminated manuscript. It's really kind of tragic that this man didn't live to give us a little more work. Because, as you said, he died probably within months of this thing seeing print. But yeah, it is an ideal autumn comic book, because it just the way it just kind of hovers on the threshold between absolutes, between the material and the ethereal, between the temporal and the timeless, between youth and age, between life and death, but kind of teetering towards age and death, just like the season of autumn itself. Like autumn, reading this comic is a liminal phenomenon, and the fact that it's as you pointed out, Chris, that it's a self-contained story. It's a one and done, which gives you a lovely encapsulated look at not only Shang-Chi and what his world was at this time, but also just this wonderfully little bookended and hermetically sealed pellet of wonder that Shang-Chi encounters on one dreamlike October night. I'm assuming it's October. It doesn't tell us the month, but it feels like October night. Now we're introduced to Nayland Smith, to his love interest Leiko, the little framing sequence there at the beginning at Stormhaven Castle in Scotland, and then we travel by map to get to Hong Kong, and we kind of enter this dream space in which the rest of the story occurs. And then Shang-Chi, at the end of it, is forced to kind of reawaken to his life, but not unaltered by the experience he's had and the reader have had with him. It's beautiful. It is one of the more beautiful comics that I've ever read, and I'm just sorry that it took so long for me to go through the different phases of the moon before my optimal mindset was in place, that I could really see the comic for what it is. If I try to read this thing again in February, I'll fall asleep on it again. But for now, it's beautiful. And for now, I might as well just say straight A's across the board for when we get to the rating part of it.
Yeah, I think we're all going to say that. It's funny because I normally not only welcome, but I look forward sometimes to disagreeing with fellow panelists when I feel they can articulate their thoughts, well enough that we can actually have a discourse on why we disagree. And I know certainly you're more than capable of articulating your thoughts, Adam. But I have to tell you, when you first started your little preamble about how you read it and were underwhelmed by it the first time, I felt palpably disappointed. And I don't have the love of this that Chris does, but just having read through it and just been kind of taken in so much by it. To hear you start to talk about it in a way where you're like, I was going to find that somewhat depressing, but I'm glad that the season has led you to liking it as much as you do now.
It was never the comic, Paul. It was me.
It sounds like we're breaking up. It's not you, it's me.
Shang-Chi number 114 would like to tell me that it can't fix me.
This was my first exposure to Masters of Kung Fu.
Oh.
I I have not read it before. Luckily, it is all available on Marvel Unlimited at the moment. So I'm basically going through their shitty system and clicking add to library on everything, because that's the only thing Marvel Unlimited does not do well. So that's even further to what you were saying earlier, Chris, is the fact that you got to go issue by issue to add to just add an entire series to your library off the top of your back. But I loved every single minute of this package here, and I want to see more, because this is an artist that deserved so much more than unfortunately his short life had to offer, and I can only imagine what more Gene Day would have looked like, and what series he would have graced his pencils on and his inks later on in life. But I'm very glad that we have what we have, and Masters of Kung Fu is now I now understand what Chris keeps talking about.
Ian, I'm honored. Yeah, it's a series that, and Paul hit the nail on the head. There's a James Bond / Enter the Dragon vibe to it, and that could go in a very sort of kitschy direction. But Monk elevates everything, and then when he's working with the artist, he's working with Galassi, Zek, Day. You're getting something that's very special, and it wasn't like any other comic Marvel was producing at this time. And it was in the Marvel universe firmly, but it was still in a whole nother plane. So, in fact, one other point I want to make, because I'd forgotten about this as I'm looking through my original copy here, is that even Marvel editorial understood they had something. Because when you go to the bullpen bulletins page, remember they used to do the hype box in the 80s? Mm-hmm. They'd highlight certain books, and they say, Master of Kung Fu 114. For this one, writer Doug Monk sequestered himself in the library researching ancient Chinese legends. And he's come up with a chillingly authentic story. See for yourself. So that's the same month G.I. Joe #1 came out. But they were hyping Master of Kung Fu 114. So I'm glad you appreciate it, gentlemen.
I like it, as I mentioned, I'm slowly picking up issues of this series, and 114 has not been picked up by me yet. But when I'm in when I'm going through like a $1 box or a $2 box, and they have these things in them, I still have enough books on my want list that I don't just focus on one series. I'll cherry pick here and there through different stuff. But I can tell you for a fact that if this issue is in there, I will take this above any other issue of the series right now.
Well, yeah, and the Gene Day stuff is near the end of the series, so you should be able to find a lot of these in bargain bins. Yes. So, happy hunting.
Yeah, I've so far, I had none until very recently, and I think, thankfully, I've actually gotten issues 15 and 16 on fairly low prices.
Oh, great! Oh, you mean the original special edition issues?
Yes. Okay. So I feel like the hardest part of the job is already done. Now it's just a matter of tracking down the other issues. And I have to correct what I said earlier about it being a Thor reprint series. I was mistaken. It was Thor for issues 1 through 3, and then for issues 4 through 14,
was it Nick Fury?
It was Nick Fury.
That's right. Or Sergeant Fury.
Sergeant Fury, yes, not right. Nick Fury, not the spy.
Yep. Talon Commandos. Yep.
Yes. So.
One last comment I want to make, because I'm just looking. If you look at page 16, when he confronts the Sci-Fan in final battle, and Shang-Chi finds the corpse of the Archer, and the design of the Sci-Fan's armor is breathtaking that Day has conceived, and as the Sci-Fan appears in shadow, just the eyes of his helmet illuminate, and then you see like scintillating light spangling off his armor. It's incredible artwork. And then you see Shang-Chi's face as the rage consumes him because he's so angry with the murder this man has committed. And he just lets, like, from the elemental core of his being, this battle cry. It is I can't put this artwork in, like, when you look at like comic book artwork, this is just breathtaking stuff. My God. Ian is right on the money. The fact that this Gene Day died as young as he did. If you go on Wikipedia, they have his bibliography of work. It's not that much. A lot of like Marvel like single issues or a couple issues, some fanzine stuff. an issue of Tales of the New Teen Titans, a Swords of Cerberus issue 3. That's it. He did some Savage Sword of Conan. He did some Star Wars stuff. I remember he did a classic Star Wars cover, which you've all seen, with Boba Fett on it, which is one of the classics of the Marvel run. But what a tragedy. God.
Yeah, well, at 31, I mean, we can all appreciate how young that is.
Yeah.
That's just terrible. He did Thor number 300.
Oh, wow.
Which is, that's, if I remember right, they were doing the Rings of Nibelung retelling with Thor as Siegfried, and I think 300 was... I think 300 was the culmination of that story, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, so many great artists we lose early in this business. I think of him. I think of Waringo. Mike Turner. But just so many artists that I'd love to see more of that unfortunately didn't quite happen that way.
And last thing I'll say is our beloved Pants, in his quest to always discover original artwork, this year found and purchased for me, because it's one of my holy grails, a Gene Day page from Master of Kung Fu.
Wow, nice.
It's from issue 116. It's and by the way, we talked about black and white, so I'm looking at his black and white work. Like next, I'll show it. Well, I think Murd at least has seen this. I don't know if Ian has, but it's just. This guy was in a class by himself.
I'm going to ask you a favor, Chris.
Sure.
When this episode posts on Back to the Bins, and we have a Back to the Bins Facebook page, would you mind taking a picture of that and posting it on the Facebook page?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I appreciate it, because I think anybody listening to this, I really want to see it, but I think it'd be nice that in getting it for me to see it, everybody gets to who's part of the Facebook group.
You bet. All right, well, A+ for me, gentlemen, all across the board.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting any debate from anyone.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is just an excellent choice. So I have to say, so far, every time I've had you guys on, I'm not disappointed with your choices of books.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
It's always a pleasure to talk about what you guys bring, and either it's something that's just exceedingly good like this, or it's something that sparks a lot of conversation, which either way is a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever read More Invincible, by the way? Speaking of former picks of mine that I brought to the table.
I read more of it, but I still never finished it because a squirrel went by and I got distracted.
I'm just glad you at least read a little bit more to see what it's all about. So
yeah, what I read of that series I thought was terrific.
Excellent.
And I think we even talked about it when you were on, that I'm a bigger fan of that than The Walking Dead as far as Kirkland's writing. Kirkman's writing, excuse me.
Yep. Right there with you. And Kirkland brand products are very good too.
Yeah, those are good too. All right, I'm gonna save my book for another show. As much as I enjoy talking to you guys, it's coming up on 11 o'clock soon.
Yeah, we gotta get up early.
And I'm old. But it's always a pleasure to have you guys on. I really would love to have you on more often, but I know it's hard to sync the schedules.
Well, whenever we can sync it, we'll definitely make it happen.
Hell yeah, Paul. We really appreciate you coming on. It's always a great time.
It's a pleasure on our end too, Paul.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you guys for coming on, and thank you everybody for listening. And if you're not already subscribed to Comic Geek Speak, I can't imagine. Yep. So we'll just I don't even think I have to give a plug for you. I think it's much more likely that there's listeners of Comic Geek Speak who aren't subscribed to this. who might get exposure to it on the cross-pollination.
I'll just say for those listeners that are yours, just make sure to listen to our most recent Black Widow Spotlight, because it is a doozy.
I haven't seen that yet.
It's coming out shortly after we're done recording here, so by the time it hits your feed, it'll be out and running. But it's by first time I ever got to be in the studio, and it was a rollicking good time, and Shane was there, and can't get any better than that.
And Ian, you were in fine Borscht Belt humor. Let me say that, by the way.
I aim to please, my friend. I know what they love.
I look forward to that because your spotlight episodes are some of my favorites.
Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
All right, thank you, and once again, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to our show, and we hope you'll continue to join us each and every week for more good old-fashioned comic book back issue awesomeness. You can contact Back to the Bins to leave feedback, comments, questions, suggestions, and criticisms via email at bins@twotruefreaks.com or by joining the Back to the Bins group on Facebook. Back to the Bins is a proud affiliate of the Two True Freaks Internet Radio Network, which you may find at www.twotruefreaks.com. Two True Freaks is a registered trademark of DiManzo Corps of Milan, Italy. All rights reserved. Please take a moment to stop by the twotruefreaks.com site and check out their many other fine podcasts, won't you? Thanks, and we'll see you next week.